everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Interfaith Friends, a ministry of Shepherd of the Lake Lutheran Church, where we value our neighbor's faith. We honor the sacred stories of our neighbors as we learn from one another and work together to foster a more just and peaceful world. So my guest today is Ben Connolly. Ben is a Soto Zen Buddhist priest and teacher. He also teaches mindfulness in a wide variety of secular contexts, including police training and addiction recovery groups. He works with multi-faith groups focused on intersectional liberation, racial justice, and climate justice. Ben is based at Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, travels to teach across the United States, has written for Tricycle and Lion's Roar magazines, and is author of Inside the Grass Hut, Inside Vasubandhu's Yogacara, and Mindfulness and Intimacy. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a round of applause for pronouncing Vasubandhu correctly.
Thank you. I was actually just going to ask that. I forgot to ask beforehand, and did I pronounce it?
Nailed it.
Awesome. That's a win. I feel like that's a win. So thank you. And Ben and I we were just talking, we've probably been in the same rooms doing interfaith and multi-faith stuff before, but we've never actually been able to sit down and have a conversation. So I am incredibly grateful, Ben, to you for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm super excited for our conversation. And I'm just going to dive right in and ask, how did you come to be a Buddhist priest?
Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful question. Well, from one perspective, the causes and conditions that produce anything are vast beyond comprehension. So it's unknowable. So that's true from my perspective, or a useful way of looking at things. But narrative can be helpful too. And I do have a conventional story. And, it's hard to know where to start. But what I basically, I came to Buddhist practice because I was in early recovery from addiction and was really struggling with recovery, and I had a lot of mental health problems and behavioral health problems and was just really not doing very well. And so I was looking for as many ways as I could find to try and find some stability and wellness. And I used a lot of different methods, which I will not review. But I also was like, oh, maybe I'll try meditation. I'd heard meditation was helpful. And so, I got some books, and the books about meditation a lot of them were written by Buddhists. And I thought, this Buddhism really resonates with my values. I was raised atheist. But I was like, oh, this really resonates with my values. And then I tried the meditation, and it was like, oh, this seems to really improve my life. And basically, I tried sitting with a group of Buddhists, and it was like that seemed a little more supportive than sitting alone. And then I started listening to a teacher, and that seemed pretty supportive. And then I started meeting with a teacher, and then I started putting in the bike racks at the Zen Center, and then I started going to the retreats and cooking the meals. And the next thing you know, I was like, well, I think I'll just be ordained. Now I'm really involved in a lot of Buddhist communities, and I'm really grateful. It's very beautiful. And for me, I always understood that the suffering that I was experiencing was both really terrible for me, but it impeded my ability to be there for other people and to be a part of people's wellness. And that was painful to me. And so the path has always been for me about kind of integrating my own well-being with being engaged with communities that are focused on well-being for all.
Yeah. So there's a communal aspect to the Buddhist path that's, yes.
Fundamental. Yeah. Taking refuge. We take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So Buddha means various things, but you get the general idea. Dharma means kind of the body of teaching or truth, and Sangha means community. So, a lot of times now there's a lot of people meditating in the United States, and there's a lot of literature about it. And probably I would say one of the main things that is not being done well within that discourse is realizing the importance of community.
Yeah.
So it's because, human beings, we have a social framework that's really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we see that in a lot of the major world religions and in like neuroscience, right? Like actually, like who knew that, scientists are finding all of these things that like all the ancient wisdom traditions were like, right? Like we told you, right? But now we can see it, right? We can see it with hard evidence. So yeah. So what was it about the Buddhist story? When I think about that Buddhist story, is there like a Buddhist story? What is the story of Buddhism? How did this begin? And I know that when we're meeting and talking with anybody from any ideology or religion or faith tradition or anything, we're like, no one person can be speaking for like everything, and there's such a wide spectrum of belief and understanding within people who even claim to identify with the same story, right? Like I know within our congregation, but like even in my Bible studies, we all have like sometimes very different theologies and different ways of practicing that and all those things. So there was a question in there, right?
Oh, I got it.
Buddhism, that was my question. Thank you.
That's good, because you kind of alluded to how I think it's valuable to answer that first question. What is the story of Buddhism? And first, there are a lot of stories. It's, most of the textual tradition of Buddhism is stories of interactions between people, conversations. So oftentimes those conversations involve like a very clear psychological or ethical message, but not always. And there's also kinds of poetry. So Buddhism recognizes what I call, the big word for it is polyvocality. So that there's not a single universal discourse that is absolutely true. There are stories who are either effective at helping people be free from suffering or not. But having said that, my story comes through the lens of a white person from the United States who converted to Buddhism like 20 years ago. I'm saying converted because it seems like convenient language for people. I don't think of myself as having really converted to anything. I just started doing something, but it's a common language, so I use it anyway. So, the vast majority of Buddhists, there are hundreds of millions of Buddhists scattered through a wide variety of very culturally diverse Asian countries. So Sri Lanka is a predominantly Buddhist country, as is Korea. Those are very culturally distinct. And the types of Buddhism practiced there and the beliefs are enormously different. So even when I will try and say I'll say like the first and most fundamental teaching of Buddhism is that there's suffering in the world and you can do something about it. That's the basic idea that underlies all of Buddhism, because it's a summation of the Four Noble Truths, which is the first and most repeated teaching.
So can we just pause there for a second? There's suffering in the world.
Yeah.
And there's something we can do about it.
Yes.
Wow. Right? Because it's especially, I guess there's always been suffering, right? But it feels like we're bombarded, like we have our own stuff, and then we're bombarded with all of the things, and it can get to feel like we can get into a place of, okay, I'll speak personally. I can get into a place of despair, right? Which for me, despair is like, there's nothing I can do that's going to make a difference at all in this, because it's all so big.
Yep.
So there's suffering in the world, and there's something we can do about it. Okay, thank you. Next.
Yeah. Well, and the little asterisks I was going to put on that kind of tied back to what I was saying is, I was giving that talk once, and someone from a different Buddhist tradition came, and they were like, "Oh, that runs counter to our tradition."
Okay.
They're like, their tradition is all about it becomes complex, but it's just like being grateful for the fact that everything is already Buddha. Okay. And Buddha just means totally free from suffering. And that may make no sense, because you're like, it obviously isn't free from suffering. I can just look in my own heart or read the news. But they have their whole beautiful and complex
Sure.
theologies that supports this. And the people I know who hold this as their theology are beautiful and amazing. And so even within Buddhism, like what I would think is the most basic shared teaching is not. Human beings are amazing. Culture is vast.
It is. And we were talking earlier too about like even within Christianity, when I do the stuff with the Minnesota multifaith network, and I get to do, I'm sure you do this too. We go and talk to high school kids and middle school kids about, right? And I'm like, okay, you have to understand, like, if you ask the question, who is Jesus? Like, not all Christians have the same answer to that, right? Why did Jesus come here? Not all Christians have the same answer to that. I always answer with, it depends on who you ask. Since you're asking me, I will tell you, this is what I believe. And you will find other Christians for whom that is not, and that's just how it is. At least, and their faith and the way that they're connecting is feeding and filling them for the sake of the world as well. So it's like, anyway.
Yeah.
Cut you off there.
I like to say, well, I won't even get into this. What I want to say is this acknowledgement of the fact that people have different views and they matter. And that is the way that the way people view the world is what governs how they act. Like that may seem really basic, but they're different. And this Buddhist tradition I'm part of really is constantly acknowledging this. When you meet someone, instead of being like, well, the truth is X, and you are either aligned with the truth or you are wrong, instead of thinking that way, you're like, I have this perspective, you have that perspective. Is trying to see this as clearly as I can. What can I actually do that would help us to be more free from suffering?
Yeah.
So it shifts out of the idea that there's an absolute, knowable, and stateable truth, and realize there's just a process. And the truth is that there's a process. Which is just a different way to meet people, because I'll often be like, well, if you just did it the right way, everything would be fine. And it's like, what if I'm like, well, you see it that way. What can we actually do together that would help?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. You mentioned that was the first of four.
The Four Noble Truths?
Yeah, Four Noble Truths.
That was like a summation of the Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
I don't really want to unpack, but the basic idea is, acknowledging suffering and the vastness of it, and then and then realizing, I can do something.
Okay.
Instead of trying to pretend it's not there or being overwhelmed, you just get used to it.
Yeah.
And if you've ever practiced meditation for a long time, if there's anybody watching this who's done a lot of meditation, you probably thought, well, I would just come to meditation and then I'll be all peaceful and I'll be super Zen. And it's very common. Sometimes people do experience that, but a lot of times people are like, I sat down to meditate and I just got more ornery, or I felt really anxious, or I felt like I couldn't sit upright, or my mind is just churning away. And it's like, that's kind of like what it's like to be human.
Yes.
We're just getting closer to how we are.
Yes.
This is not about getting away from how we are. It's like, how can I get closer to you?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a real honesty in that too.
Yeah.
And it's, we have to name a thing, or acknowledge a thing, before we are able to do anything about it or respond to it. And I think that includes our own state of being, our own emotions. It's like, I'm feeling a thing. I don't know what that thing is. So I'm going to go pray, or, go sit. Yeah. And then in that, it's like, why isn't this just going away magically? It's like, well, maybe, it's becoming louder or more amplified so that, so that it becomes a thing that I actually name in my life. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe this is something that I need to, what is it that I can do about this, right? It's information. It's information. I think when I heap judgment on that information, that's where I get like kind of in this vortex, right? Where it's like, why am I fill in the blank? It's like, why am I human? Why am I human? I was talking with somebody, gosh, I don't remember who it was yesterday, but someone from my church, and I was like, why is it that we try to like run away from being human, or we like shame ourselves for being human? I'm like, if it was good enough for God, right? In our tradition anyway, like, do we really believe what we say we believe, right? If it was good enough for God to be human, like, I'm sure Jesus had like ingrown toenails, and like he clearly got super pissed sometimes, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's right there, right? Like, he was human, right? So anyway, yeah. And I think, so it's like, oh, okay, why am I, oh, right, because I'm human. So how do I sit with myself and have compassion, right?
Yeah.
For the human that I am and that I've been, that, and the decisions I've made that led me to this moment and all the things, right? And then from that place of compassion, then I think we can begin to offer that to others as well. And I really wish I could just magically sit down and have like, I could just pray it away, right? Like,
Yeah.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah. It's a powerful urge. Yeah. Compassion, there's lots of ways to think about what compassion is, but I feel like sometimes people talk to me and they're like, I don't understand how to be compassionate. And for me, a useful thing to do is think of compassion not as a feeling, but just the actual being with suffering. So compassion just etymologically means with suffering. So like, just like you might, if someone you love was suffering and you're able to just listen to them while they talk about it without giving any advice or figuring anything out, just hearing them and being present, that helps them to feel healed and connected. And the same capacity is available internally. You may not be able to sustain it for like minutes at a time, but a difficult feeling comes up, you just go, I see you. And people find that unsatisfying because we want that like get rid of it thing.
Yeah.
But the get rid of it thing is the whole problem.
Yeah.
And I think that connects to the kind of work that you're so laudably doing here, where it's like, well, I'm going to talk to people that have different beliefs. So we have a somewhat sometimes unacknowledged separation of people in the world through ideologies, religions, races. And one of the many things that we can do to help with that is to just create opportunities where it's like we can actually just listen to each other. And I don't have to sit here and figure out whether like your religious views are correct, or even if they align with mine. I could just be like, they're yours. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. As long as, yes, and when people's religious beliefs lead them to marginalize or other people, or tell people that they are less than in God's like, what? Or that they're, you know what I mean, that they're unlovable because of who they love, or, whatever it is, it's like, that's when my claws come out, and that's when I'm like, that's not okay, right? So like, yes, and, right? I always say that I'm a mystic, right? I am a mystic unless I think that your theology is damaging somebody else, in which case I'm a theologian and I'm a well-trained one, and let's go, right? Like, toe to toe right now. So
yeah, you're unplaying.
You don't know, and you're wrong.
Yeah, so the thing is, like, I think it's possible to both hold that space of just awareness of people's being without losing boundaries. In fact, that's like the subject of a lot of my work, is how those two polarities are not separate. So I can both see that someone is doing something I believe is harmful, and do something to impede their ability to do that harm, while actually trying to understand what they're saying and what they think and what they feel and caring about it. It's possible to do all that. It's really sometimes really hard. I mean, there's certain people with sometimes
so
we have a whole tradition. It's like I was taught by Christians to like pray for people I had resentments toward. And we have the very same practice in Buddhism where you direct loving thoughts towards people towards whom you have negative feelings. Because it's like, I'm the one suffering from the aversion, but it doesn't mean that I shouldn't get up, and stop and do things that impede people's ability to do harm. I do a lot of work like that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And it's so much more gracious than let's go. You're like, well, the Christians taught me. I'm like, yeah.
Well, there is a hearty tradition of debate in Buddhism, and it's probably more a characteristic of my personal style than anything else. That I'm more interested in dialogic contexts that do not have a debate flavor. But actually, I'm corresponding with some teachers in another tradition where debate is a big deal. And they're kind of drawing me in. I'm like, okay, I'll try and do it this way.
Well, I think it's good. It's good to, both and, right?
Yeah.
Lutherans are all about both and paradox. It's all, paradox for saint and sinner, right? We're all of these things, and everything in the hands of human beings is ambiguous and can be used for life-giving purposes or non-life-giving purposes. There's nothing that's inherently evil. It's all just, those kinds of things. So we, that's our theology. So both and, right? Both pieces. And so it's not either or, it's both and. Or it could be either or and or both and. Who knows?
Whoa.
Anyway.
I got a graphic calculator to figure that out.
Yes. So it sounds, from your work and your bio and the things that you're saying here. I know you said that you're, the most compelling part of this for you is the communal liberation and healing, and that's what's needed, and that's it's beautiful, it's necessary, and there's just something when you're talking about the ways that you hold compassion, and extend grace for folks who have different ideologies or ways of being and seeing, and at the same time impede anyone's ability to do harm to another, right? Both and. There is, I don't feel like I even have words, but there's something that lines up. I feel it in my body. There's something that lines up and just says, yeah, that's it. That's what we need. Like, that's the sauce. So I want to thank you, Ben, for being you. I want to thank you for sharing your time and your energy and just who you are with us and with this world. And I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. And I do hope that it is the first of many. Yeah, I'm really feel grateful to be invited into this. And this is really fun for all the people in the community who are watching this video. I just want to extend my heart to you. I know the last couple of years have been really difficult, and I do believe we can't do it alone, but no one can do it for you. And you have power, which is cool, whether you know it or not. And so I do hope to come across paths with you again soon. Yeah, that would be fantastic. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next month.